Monster Hunter Wilds, the latest entry in the Monster Hunter series, comes out swinging. While the series has always been popular in Japan, it really took off in the West with 2018's Monster Hunter World. Hosts of new hunters found themselves stuck in the sights of Rathalos bearing down on them, even though the first handful of hours was relatively slow for the action-packed title. Monster Hunter Wilds avoids that problem immediately, with a cinematic chase through a desert that looks straight out of something like Uncharted. It doesn't let up either, with each monster reveal and fight feeling huge and cinematic. The new changes to the formula, with the more expansive and open world, quality of life changes, and more, add a lot to the tried and true formula, making it feel fresher than ever before. Monster Hunter Wilds is constantly epic with the huge cinematic fights the series is known for at its core, with only a few technical issues hampering the experience. Monster Hunter Wilds follows a hunter and his accompanying crew as they help Nata, a young boy they help find wandering by himself, reunite with his people, the mysterious Keepers. Separated after an attack by a mysterious monster only known as the White Wraith, Nata is desperate to find his way home, and it's up to the hunter to get him there. Along the way, in a largely unexplored area of the world, the hunter and company interact with various native groups, helping them deal with the monsters wreaking havoc. Not everything is as it seems, and as you work to uncover the mysteries behind Nata, the Keepers, and the world itself, Monster Hunter Wilds has a greater focus on story than ever before. The narrative itself is interesting and thrilling, with multiple huge set pieces guiding the experience, even outside the monster hunting. The opening of the game kicks off with a chaotic run through the desert, with sandworm-like monsters leaping all around trying to take you down. These moments are more cinematic and involved than in previous outings, making the hunter feel more like an important part of the world, even outside the titular fights. One of the best parts of Monster Hunter Wilds is actually the quieter moments between these fights, as you get to know the rest of the cast and the world at large. Riding along on a secret, a dinosaur-like companion similar in function to the Palamutes from Monster Hunter Rise, the game slows down to fill the player in on the world's lore. A ride-along that is useful for collecting resources as much as it is for taking the world in, they slow the player down to just exist in the world. The story here is easily the most interesting and deep the series has ever attempted, touching on themes of colonization, tradition, history, and the impact people have not on just each other, but the world around them. Monster Hunter Wild takes some big swings that it means with not just force, but a compassionate understanding. The characters from the gung-ho and endearing blacksmith and Gemma to the quiet confidence and care of your handler Alma, they each get their moment to shine. I've never cared as much about the cast and narrative of a Monster Hunter game before. Monster Hunter Wilds is definitely the new standard for storytelling. The heart of any Monster Hunter game has always been the fights with the larger-than-life beasts. Here, Monster Hunter Wilds is no slouch, with plenty of new and returning monsters alike to push the player to the brink. With 14 weapon types to choose from, Monster Hunter Wilds has a different weapon for everyone. From the bow that can rattle enemies with arrows, to the monster stopping and crushing hammer, you're expected to spend time in the training center to find the right weapon for you. In previous entries, I was a mainstay with the insect glaive, whipping and whirling around in the air with the double-bladed lance. This time around, I opted to experiment with the longsword, leaving me feeling like the star of my favorite shonen anime. Each weapon can make the game feel entirely different, all carrying entirely different attacks, patterns, benefits, range. Taking the time to pick the weapon whose playstyle you enjoy the most can make or break the game. Wilds actually lets you bring in a second weapon for the first time, swapping out the secret when needed. I ended up using a longsword and bow combo, giving myself the up-close melee damage output and dropping back to some distance when it felt right. The new highlight of combat, though, has to be the focus and wound system. As you deal damage to an opponent enough in the same spot, a wound can form. Using the focus button to bring up the crosshairs and pull the camera a bit tighter, your hunter can actually aim their swings, giving you more control over your actions than ever before. Hitting the glowing wound in focus mode uses a special attack that can deal a ton of damage to stun the enemy, giving the hunter a precious few seconds to lay in and deal damage, heal, or take a second to regroup on the secret. It gives the player more control than ever before. In previous entries, I sometimes felt like I was just swinging wildly trying to connect. No longer, as Monster Hunter Wild lets you aim your strikes with meaningful impact. Even outside of the wounds, it actually lets you target certain parts of the monster with greater accuracy, being incredibly helpful as you try and sever or break specific parts. The wound and focus system make each weapon feel more viable than ever before, and hitting a wound in a critical moment always feels badass. Doing so while on top of a monster even uses a cinematic finishing move, dealing more damage in a way that just emboldens the player to continue the attack. Monster Hunter Wilds also sports an open world unlike ever before in the series. Your base camp is now part of the map, moving with you as you progress through the story. No more loading screens as you pick a quest and wait to load into the map. Now everything is accessible. You can ride from one biome to the next, open zones connected with passageways between them. It isn't one massive world, but a series of zones interconnected, but it works. It makes the game flow in a brand new way. If you choose to go out and explore, you can run up on a monster wandering the area. Attacking them enough automatically creates and starts a quest, and when you win, you can skip the countdown at the end and just continue on in the world. It takes the monotony and stop-start feeling of past titles out entirely, making the world feel more interconnected and lived in than ever before. Each area even has different weather conditions that can significantly change the approach at any given time. They rotate through different states, always keeping the player apprised regardless of where in the world they are. The Plenty state is relaxed and bountiful, moving into the Follow state that lessens the herbivore monsters and picks up the bad weather, while the Inclemency state is all out hostile. Rarer and more dangerous monsters can spawn in these moments, but venturing into the danger can push you and your hunter to your limits. The world is full of life as both monsters and animals scurry about, and seeing them react to the world around them just makes the entire space feel more lived in and realized. Monster Hunter Wilds is also incredibly single-player friendly, as you can now summon AI companions to help you fight if you don't have more friends hunting. The companions are surprisingly effective and useful, a get-out-of-jail-free card when used properly. If you'd rather run at the monsters alone, you can totally do that, as even though there are difficult fights, I never felt like one was insurmountable alone. The game continues to be excellent in multiplayer, but the single-player experience is just as good. Graphically, Monster Hunter Wilds is incredibly beautiful. Their art and monster design is stunning, with each creature being memorable in their own right. Just moving through the world is gorgeous. There are plenty of jaw-dropping vistas and scenery, from the sand-laden slopes of the Windward Plains to the thick foliage of the Scarlet Forest. Each locale leaves their imprint on you as you fight your way through. Some later areas have multiple levels to them, but always feel readable with landmarks to keep you moving to the next spot. That being said, playing on PS5 Pro, the technical experience is a bit hit or miss. The standard modes at 30 frames per second with ray tracing and 60 frames without, each felt rock solid without much stutters or poppin'. The PS5 Pro Enhanced mode, on the other hand, isn't as stable. Even when limiting to 40 frames per second, the frame rate can stutter and popping can be significant in the environment. It's never lasting more than a couple seconds, but it's enough to notice. Hopefully there's a patch coming to iron this mode out, but until then, the other two settings are incredibly stable. Monster Hunter Wilds sets the bar for Monster Hunter moving forward, with incredible fights, a surprisingly deep narrative, and a flow to the game that removes a lot of the monotony. It keeps you moving at a brisk pace from one set piece to the fight to the next, while also allowing moments to breathe in between. The cast is endearing and likable, and more memorable than ever before, with a story that genuinely surprised me. The fights in action are tight as ever, with the focus and wound systems giving the players more control without making anything easier. It makes Monster Hunter more accessible without removing what makes these games so special. Monster Hunter Wilds is a new gold standard and is an early Game of the Year contender.